Welcome everyone to the Human Skills Lab. Because human skills aren't soft, they're essential. I'm Heidi Peace, an educator, and I'm so excited to be here with you.
And I'm Kobe Campbell, a school counselor and licensed clinical social worker. We're teaming up to bring you real talk about school, friendships, stress, and everything in between. Whether you're struggling with homework, feeling overwhelmed, or just looking for a little motivation, you're in the right place.
In each and every episode, we'll share practical tips, personal stories, and strategies that you can actually use. Plus, we'll answer questions along the way and maybe even have some fun.
So get comfortable, take a deep breath, and let's figure this out together. We're so glad you're here. So today, welcome, we are talking today about prioritization based on our values. Last week we did a values clarification exercise. And so this week we're going to be talking about prioritizing all of our things, our tasks based on our values or using our values to do that. And so why do we want to prioritize? First of all, what is prioritization? And that's really deciding what the relative importance and urgency is of each of our tasks or things that we have in our different roles. And why do we want to do that? Because that allows us to reach our goals. If we are not prioritizing what we're doing, human nature is to slide into sort of the easiest thing or the thing that lights us up the most versus doing those things intentionally that will get us to where we want to go. Things that move the needle for us, either in our personal goals or in our jobs or in our parenting. So that's one of the reasons why we prioritize. Our first step in prioritizing is to list everything on your plate without any judgment, and that can be the hard part. So you want to put everything down in all of your roles. That could be a very long list for some of us, right? And the reason you want to do that is because, number one, it can give you a really good feeling seeing all of the things that you do, a feeling of accomplishment. Now, a note, you could feel overwhelmed and discouraged as well. Look at all of this on my plate. How am I ever going to get it done? Or I'm not currently getting it done. But what I would encourage you to do instead of become overwhelmed is to encourage yourself. Give yourself a pat on the back for all of the things that you're doing, that you're holding it together during all of this. Or maybe you're barely holding it together, or maybe you're not holding it together, but still give yourself some encouragement because you are still trying. If you're doing this exercise, you're still trying. So the no judgment piece is, the importance of the no judgment piece is that when you think about how, if we were to receive criticism from somebody, does that make us feel more or less empowered and motivated to do things? My guess is it's less. Most of us,
Definitely less.
it definitely would be less, right? I mean, think about if somebody criticizes your job performance, you are not likely to, feel good about your job performance. So if you can give yourself some grace, and the way that we talk to ourselves is as important, if not more important, than how others talk to us. So thinking about behaving towards yourself, speaking to yourself in ways that are empowering and motivating versus not motivating. The other part of the judgment piece is letting go of resentment about who should be doing this. This isn't part of my job.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have to do this. My kids should do this, not me. So we want sort of a neutral listing
Yeah, it's like
of,
protecting your energy.
yes,
You can waste your energy with all of that extra stuff, or you can just use your energy to focus on your values.
right. We're using our values as a proactive way to use our energy in a way that's going to work best for us, versus getting stuck and mired in the trap of resentment and frustration and overwhelm. And it happens to all of us, sometimes on a regular basis. And this can be a way out of that by using our values to intentionally tackle those things. So before we move into step two, which is choosing a system, we've decided a system that we are going to go through today, the Eisenhower Matrix or the Stephen Covey quadrants. He developed, sort of adjusted that Eisenhower Matrix for his system or his structure that he put together. So things that we might think about are what we need to determine what moves the needle towards where we want to go. Those tasks that move the needle, when we go into looking at the different quadrants they can go in, that becomes an important question. Two, what aligns most with your core values? Three, what lights you up? This can give you motivation for the rest of your life. Like if you have a small thing that lights you up, regardless of what quadrant it's in, it could fit because it motivates you. And then number four, what can you let go of? And on this one, I want you to be brutal. Sometimes we hang on to stuff that we like to do, but doesn't really fit with where we want to go. So just some things to think about before or as we are going into step two and actually prioritizing our tasks.
Okay, so we have four basic quadrants in this way to, I guess, assess our to-do list. So the two main things are: is it urgent or not urgent? Mm-hmm. And then is it important or not important? So those are essentially what we're looking at. So after you're done with your list, you're going to put them into categories. So if it is urgent and important, that's something we are calling the do. That's quadrant one. The next one is going to be not urgent, but essential. And this is really where, in our training, that you want to spend a lot of your time. You don't want to be in the firefight doing something that's so urgent but important that you're letting that thing cut in line, right? Because we're trying to be intentional. I think looking at everything through our values and putting it through this matrix is actually going to help us be intentional with our time, because we do have choices with our time. We do have, job descriptions and parenting obligations, but we still have choices. And we also don't toggle them on or off. Like, well, I either do this or I don't. You can also do them to varying degrees. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of power, and I think we need to stand in that power and realize the power that we do have when we are making these choices, and not be such a victim of our time. Like, oh, we have to do this. Well, we have some choices. So let's go on to the next one. So that one, that one's quadrant two, and we call that the decide. When are we going to do this? How long are we going to do this? We know this is important, but to what degree are we going to do this also? Okay, and then quadrant three. Okay, this one is deceptive. This one is the one you may want to delegate or downgrade your expectations. So for this one is the one that demands attention, but is not necessarily important. Or you could have somebody else take your place to do this. This is not dependent on necessarily you. And then quadrant four, that's the delete. That's the one that we're going to try and let go of the things that are in there. And that we call that the escape quadrant. And that's the one that are the kind of the time wasters. They're not really that important and they're not urgent. Now, if we're going to be in that quadrant, we want to do so intentionally. We want to be like, I am going to do nothing for 2 hours because I really need that. Or I have some other things I want to do, but I'm going to go walk in my backyard and ground on my grass. And I'm going to go stare at the birds because that's what I need for my wellness.
Yeah, so I think it's really important to distinguish between, like, rest does not necessarily belong in the delete quadrant. That
Correct.
Could be something that really belongs in a different quadrant.
Yes.
We don't have to be productive all of the time. That's why discernment and intentionality in quadrant four is so important, because if you need rest, you need rest. And that is a valid thing to do. It's not a time waster. And your rest might look like watching Netflix for 2 hours. And we'll get into this a little bit more when we actually talk more about the examples in quadrant four. But that intentionality of, I'm not going to let this become a pattern, but for today I've got nothing left, and this is how I'm going to rest my body. If you find that that's taking up a lot of your time or it's become a habit, then that's something to look at and maybe delete. But that's where it's very personal, and discernment and intentionality really comes into play when you're putting things into quadrants, is really um, what do I need and what do I value? Really looking at your values, right? If you have a goal you're trying to meet and you find yourself watching Netflix on a regular basis for 2 hours, then you might want to take a look at that. But again, just that intentionality.
And I think also it's who is deciding what quadrant these all go into. So
Hmm.
once you've done your list, you are the one that decides that. So some days doom scrolling can feel like intentional because
Yeah.
you're really upset about something that happened and you just needed a little bit of time. And then other times, that is really not a helpful behavior. So you have to be the one to discern what where these things go. I want to give another example for the parents out there. So one of the things that could be quadrant one, but could also be quadrant three. So the do or the delegate or downgrade expectations um, is driving your kids to somewhere. Now, this could be quality time, super important, and your teenagers are going to be gone soon, and you barely get any time with them, and maybe you get to hear them talking to their friends, and this is all very important. Yes,
Overhearing.
overhearing. Maybe this is very important for you, but also maybe your children are very upset about where they have to go, and they're complaining and arguing. That is when you might want to downgrade your expectations. Say, you know what? I'm going to get out of the basement with this complaining because this is really driving me
Yeah. Well,
into
and so
my feelings are getting triggered. I need to just realize that I have to do this, but maybe this is not the quality time I expected. And maybe this is something that I can delegate every once in a while to a well-intentioned family member that has volunteered to help.
And let's be agile on our feet here and think about if this is turning out not to be the quality time, even in the moment, like usually it is, today it's not. Tap into your values. One of mine is wellness. So if I've got a cranky kid and I'm driving them somewhere and this is not going to be quality time, that's time for me to regulate. And that is part of wellness, is in those moments of discomfort and things not going the way that I want them to, doing the inner work to regulate. And not saying it's easy, but that taps into my value. It's of my value of wellness. For me to be well, I need to be able to, in those moments of discomfort, regulate myself. So it's practice, whether I like
Finally,
it or not.
so I wanted to go over a couple examples for
Yes.
each of those quadrants that are kind of like real life examples. Like, so your job, whatever's in your job description that is important is going to go in either quadrant one or two. And again, who is the one that is discerning whether it's important or not? Now, I make slides for my job, part of my job, but redesigning them 4 times and changing the font and the color, well, that is a delete activity.
Like I said last week, Pinterest is not interested in what we're doing here, right?
So,
Sometimes that's not,
yeah, you have to say like, is this actually leading to a benefit?
yeah.
And you have to do a little bit of the cost benefit analysis. And you can say, well, I'd love to be creative. I'm like, great, great. But we have to also make sure it doesn't go into doom scrolling, right? We're not gonna take something that was okay and
Hmm.
then turn it into something that's not okay, right? So we're gonna do all of our activities with intention. So you're gonna go through your job description and go, okay, what is urgent? What is not urgent but also important? And then the things that don't fit into the important category, we're gonna see what we can do to either lessen what we have to do with those activities by delegating or downgrading our expectations, or just simply deleting them.
And
Like
so that
this
would be
could
quadrant
fall
three,
off
right?
my
If they don't fit in one or two, then we're going to see if they fit in quadrant three, which is delegate or downgrade your expectations. I want to go back to quadrant one for just a second,
yeah.
because when we're talking about urgency, I think it's important to have discernment. Whose urgency is it?
Good point.
Somebody shows up at your desk and says this thing that is very urgent to them. Is it urgent for you?
Hmm.
Not to be harsh, but sometimes the urgency does not belong to you. And that's another point of discernment. Where does this really fit? Especially for those of us who are uncomfortable with confrontation or conflict or don't want to let people down. We can end up taking on other people's urgency, and then the stuff that we have that belongs in quadrant two suffers. I mean, quadrant one suffers.
Exactly. And then you add some social relationships in there and that commingling of, oh, this person that's special to me handed me
Hmm.
this.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to tease that apart sometimes and to have some, like, maybe you'll have that conversation with them saying, hey, I know this is really important to you. I'm going to get to it. Here's my time frame.
Yeah.
Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Otherwise, maybe give this to somebody else.
This can go
But
right on out.
and I realize this is so tricky to do.
It
It's
is.
really tricky, but it's important that at least you have looked at it honestly
Hmm.
and asked yourself some important questions.
And that starts the point that we'll make probably in other quadrants too, of internal boundaries and external boundaries. So this work of being proactive and living according to your values requires external boundaries sometimes when other people's urgency is presented to you. And then internal boundaries in terms of what am I willing to take on? What am I willing, how much am I willing to suffer, right? This is going to get in the way of me getting my quadrant one and quadrant two done. So I have to have some internal boundaries and not over help again, right? Um,
Because we have to accept the fact that we only have a limited amount of waking hours. And then less than that number, we
mhm,
have a limited amount of working hours. And working, you know, with your work hat on or your home hat on or
mhm.
your wellness hat on. And if you really actually do the math on this, you realize that you can't have all of your waking hours at work. It's not going to
Mm-mm.
work. Nobody's going
Yeah.
to eat. Nobody's going to get to tutoring. This, it's important that we have that clarity around how many hours do we really have?
Yeah. The other thing I want to mention about that is somebody else's urgency coming to you and you overhelping or um, not abiding by an internal boundary or external boundary that you've set. You may actually be doing the other person a disservice too, just in terms of their own growth and development. So you're taking on something for them and then also not allowing, you're not growing and then they're not growing either, if that makes sense. And emergencies happen. I'm not saying that, you can't respond to emergencies. But again, like if the urgency is there on a regular basis and it's not yours, then that's a conversation to have.
Exactly. So let's move on with a couple more examples. So quadrant one, we said quadrant one and two should be like things that are actually applicable to your job, right? Whether your job is at home,
Hmm.
caring for children, whether you're just fresh out of college and you're like, I need to find a job. Like that is urgent and important. So like whatever hat you have on, you need to come up with, okay, what are those urgent and important or just important things that we need to get on a schedule. One of the things I want to highlight there is health. Many health can go in either of those categories, right? If you have an urgent problem, like there's something like that hurts, like you have an abscessed tooth or something, that is going to cut in the front of the line because it
Yeah.
hurts and it is going to stop you from being comfortable. But also, you have to schedule the eye appointment for next year and make sure you have it on the books. Now, that's something that would fit into quadrant two, right?
Right.
Still very important. Need to get our eyes checked, need to get new glasses, all those things. But it's important to know which category they fit and to make sure we have a system in place for those things that are not urgent yet.
Yeah.
Because if they just fall away when you grow up and become an adult, you realize there's nobody coming to schedule your doctor's appointments for you.
Nope.
You have to
That's
do
all
it
you.
yourself. And then, if you're kind of like in middle age, like you might be scheduling doctor's appointments for loved ones, whether it might be children or it might be your parents. Like these
Yeah.
are these are realities that we need to have a system to minimize the amount of overwhelm that we feel in the moment and the amount of urgency. It's hard to get an appointment next day, but it's easy to get it 6 months in advance.
Yeah.
So we can transfer some of those urgent problems if we have good systems in place.
Yeah.
And
Proactive
then
systems. Yeah.
quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. Maybe we can do some examples together.
Okay.
Like I said, changing the font, changing the color, rearranging the order for the fifth time. Those are all things that we want to limit. And we want to just bring awareness to ourselves without being judgmental.
Yeah.
So, hey, I noticed you didn't like the teal color that you selected the first time, and then you went into the little custom section
Mhm.
to create your own. Was that important? Was that
Yeah.
necessary? And we can run that through our values, right? This is like a system where we can continually do that. Well, is this learning? No. Is it connection? No. Okay. I'm
Yeah.
going to be
So
good
if
with
it's
the
not,
deal I chose.
yeah. Yeah. For quadrant 3, some of the questions I think of is, does it need to be done, and does it need to be done by me?
Great.
In asking those questions, just getting down to the nitty-gritty, if it does need to be done and nobody else is, you cannot delegate it, then that's where you downgrade the expectations and how well do I want to do this? Does it just need to be done? Can I just, uh, throw out a sheet of paper for people to sign in instead of create a thing that has, like headings and everything? So just really letting go of some of how well they need to be done and just having them done.
So we're going to really address our perfectionism and realize when, because we all want to feel competent and capable, and
Yes.
we want to look professional,
Yeah.
whatever it is we're doing, but also weighing that against the amount of time it's going to take and putting it in the proper order. Well,
Yeah.
I'll get to that if I can get to that,
Yeah.
right? But I'm not going to lose sleep over it. I'm not going to not be able to be there with my family at dinner because of that. Putting some boundaries in place,
Hmm.
but again, weighing them against what you value most.
Another thing that comes up, I think, too, is especially with those things that we don't want to let go of, um, is avoidance. Avoidance of the hard stuff. Maybe you have some stuff in quadrant 1 and 2 that isn't easy, emotionally or actually, mentally, physically, whatever. But it's stuff that needs to get done or really does align with the core value. A lot of times we can get really sucked into the things that we like to do or that are easy to do, or then this isn't necessarily the stuff that lights us up for motivation. That has a place too. But when we spend too much time there, or we're just doing stuff that makes us feel good, that's easy, but we know we've got this other thing over there to do that's not, be intentional and be aware of that, because that can happen. That's a really easy trap to fall. I'm not saying I have or have not fallen into that trap, but it's an easy one to fall into, because the other stuff maybe isn't as enjoyable or isn't as easy.
Right. And then I think I want to bring back to one of the questions you pointed me to, is how much do I want to suffer?
Mm,
If you are not sleeping, if your family life is suffering, if your work life is suffering, really noticing where that's coming from can help you address it. And then
mm.
ask yourself, well, how much do I want to suffer? And just asking yourself that question can kind of help you to take a step back and not be so tunnel visioned on one specific task.
Tunnel visioned on one specific task or resentful about it being on your plate. So when we
Yes.
look at the circle of control, right, and I will put a visual somewhere once we're done. The inner circle is the stuff that you can control, and the concentric circle on the outside is the stuff that you can't control, and there's a whole lot we can't control. The stuff on the inside, us, our reactions, our thoughts, words, feelings, behavior, all of that stuff, is within our control. I'm not saying it's easy, but um, looking at what you can control and doing something with that can help to pull you out of that sort of overwhelm, frustration, resentment that can come with, I don't think this should be mine. Why is this on my plate? And all of that goes along with it. Um, so I think that can be a tool that can be really helpful when we're feeling overwhelmed. What do I have control over? And then the flip side of that is what you do have control over. Make a plan. Do some action. That really can often help to decrease the intensity of feelings around that.
Great point. I'd like to take a moment just to sum up what are our 4 quadrants and then what do we do with each of those quadrants. So the first one is really important and also urgent. Okay, so it's necessary and it's urgent. And that's the do. So we want to do the things in that category. If they're extremely pressing, maybe those cut the line. Maybe they can cut like partway through the line. You can use your discretion based on the thing you need to get done. And then having that good neutral mindset of this needs to get done. And try and limit all of the excess energy that we can spend ruminating or resenting or whatever else we might be feeling that day. And then quadrant 2, that's your proactive. That is where, hey, it's easy to schedule a doctor's appointment 6 months out, but it's really not to schedule it next day. So what can we do that is proactive? And then we decide and make a system so that can get done in a reasonable amount, with a reasonable amount of effort, and also that we kind of believe it's going to get done. Because if we can make a system that we can get behind, that can also free up a lot of our brain from the worry, from the overwhelm, because we have a system that we trust.
I will say, I think we could do a whole other episode on that system.
Yes.
But one thing that I like that is not entirely, what's the word I'm looking for? Institute. I haven't developed the habit of this yet, is a once a week kind of weekly overview of what's going on in your week. And there are lots of people that have different ways of doing it, different, like a weekly, a monthly, and a yearly review. But just having some time, even if it's just 10 minutes, to sit down and look at what's going on can be really proactive and helpful. And that can help you prioritize your tasks because you know what's going on in your week.
Yeah. And then for quadrant 3, that's the deceptive quadrant. Those are things that are not important but can feel urgent, or they can feel urgent for somebody else but not
Yeah.
necessarily for you. So you have to decide if you're going to delegate that or if you're going to downgrade your expectations. Maybe this is just a neutral task you're not going to be super excited about. Maybe it's it you can decide where you put that in your list of priorities. And then quadrant 4, that's the escape. If can we delete some of those?
Yeah.
Are those some activities that we don't need, and those can free up so much time in our life? Maybe we can even think of it as, okay, well, I have, this amount of time, say 10 hours. I have 10 hours of like pretty good energy levels. I'm not tired. I can get things done. So do I want to use, 2 hours on Netflix of that 8 hours that I have available to me this day? And, that is a choice that you can make.
Yeah. Yeah. Coming back to also what we said before, that not all of our hours in the day need to be productive, right? So you get to decide what it is that you actually need and what really is a time waster or avoidance tactic from the hard stuff. So when we're talking about those 4 quadrants, a couple of questions that I also came up with was, does this task contribute to my long-term goals and values? So when you're deciding the top 2 quadrants, that's a good question to ask yourself. Does it contribute to my long-term goals or values? Does it have to be done right now or face consequences? If yes, that would be urgent. Um, does it help somebody else more than it helps me? Then it's possibly important, uh, possibly not important, sorry, but it could be urgent. Again, it's that internal and external boundaries, and it's a dance, it's a navigation, it's an adjustment, and you'll learn and grow if you're not comfortable um, with those boundaries, if you're really interested in living your values. And then, does this task take up more time than it's worth? If yes, then it belongs in quadrant 4. It might not be urgent or important. Um, you might want to let go of it. And when in doubt, go with your gut feeling. Be honest with yourself. Be brutal in terms of the things you can let go of. Um, and then it's we're back to the internal work. That's what the human skills are, is the internal work, and developing those skills to be able to set the boundaries, regulate yourself, make your life smoother. It's not anybody else's responsibility but ours, right? What's within our control is what's presented to us, our reaction to that, our handling of that, our resources that we reach out to be able to handle it. It's not that you have to do it all yourself, it's that you have to recognize, oh, this is something that's not in my control, and I'm having a really hard time with this. I really want to blame that other person. I really want to talk about and complain about how awful it is. And sometimes we will. That's fine. And
Yeah.
also then it's our responsibility to wrap that back up and, you know, get back to okay.
So life comes at you really fast sometimes, and we
Sometimes.
all need to equip ourselves with the most human skills we can. I also want to remind you that this podcast is for informational purposes and does not constitute professional advice. Also, our views are our own and do not reflect the views of the school district for which we work. We thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that you tune in next time. Thank you.